Pretty good light air look right there.
Yep, I agree with that completely. I think it's up to the helmsperson to decide when it's time for the second lured person to come into the hole. It's pretty apparent, I think. I don't drive much, but I know right away when the driver gets grumpy, and you can just feel the boat's trying to head up. The spinnaker trimmer is constantly like, down one, down one, down one. It's like, try it. Get somebody off the lured rail into the hole, and the boat will just track straighter. The tiller should follow the boat downwind, zero helm, and if it's anything besides that, move the weight so that the boat will go straight.
And I think it's, you want to be constantly flattening, right? Because flattening is accelerating. So like in this mode, there's maybe 3 people to leeward, but it's lighter. So huff hits, maybe the boat rocks up a little bit, then the spinnaker trimmer, the driver, can flatten the boat and accelerate. It's like a roll tap. If there was 3 people to windward, it may be flatter, and puff might hit, the boat may not rock up, and then you only have the wind kind of accelerating the boat. And as it gets windier, you need less weight to leeward to do the heel flatten. So I think that's kind of the, for me as a trimmer, that's the big trigger, is if my weight can't flatten the boat enough, then we pull the person in.
And moving together, and this team actually is exceptional of it. I wish we had a video of it.
I do too. They're really good. They're the best.
You know, when the trimmer calls for down one, the trimmer goes shoulders out a little bit. The guy, Charles, in the hatch, and the main trimmer who's sitting to leeward, they just a little bit in with the trimmer. And then as soon as the trimmer kind of moves their shoulders back up, they go back to their normal spot. And they're just always very together. I won't use the term rocking, but they are rocking the whole way downwind. And it's really fast, and all the good teams do it.
Rowing.
Sure. As long as the boat is turning correctly with the way you're moving your shoulders, it's legal to move your weight to steer the boat, and it's what the fastest teams are doing, and it's in unison is the key.
So like we had a severe downwind problem at the regatta last weekend on the first day, and basically Ed, who coaches us, pulled us aside and was like, Franny, you have to drag Bill with you, and you just have to follow as Allan moves. If you do that, we're going to be infinitely better. She sits in front, Bill's the tactician behind. He's usually looking at the course, so he's not paying attention to what I do. And she would basically watch. So I'd be like, all right, like she would just see me start flattening, and she would grab Bill by the shoulder, just move him, and then just kind of pull him back. And as soon as we did that, it was a night and day difference. She would just watch what we were doing while she was talking, possibly doing things. But just that little bit of movement, and we're not talking like we're heeling the boat over, rail in the water, flattening. It's just enough to steer the boat, just a little bit, and it made a world of difference.
Fast.
And the whole goal for me in the steering is just making sure that the kite stays pressured up. The kite cannot go soft, especially in this lighter stuff. Because as soon as it goes soft and the apparent wind goes back, your turn up just becomes enormous, and you have to, like, also you lose a lane like you're going upwind. It's pretty bad.
And God forbid that happens, but when it does, what's your move as the trimmer?
To do what?
Like, you probably stand up. Like
Oh,
it's no longer
if
shoulders.
we lose
It's like
everything, I'm like
10,
standing
you stand on the lured rail
and
try
get
to
the
turn.
bow up, and then it's like 3, 2, 1. We all flatten to get the boat to go straight again.
Not
Probably
rock.
is a roll, but yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to. I mean,
Yeah,
Well, you're allowed one.
right,
You can do
so-
one, it's that you can't do 3.
Right.
That's
So it's like when we get in trouble, the boat gets down speed, I'm like, all right, we gotta get the bow at 10 degrees. It's like everybody in, flatten the boat, and it comes up. But
That's
when it was only me doing it, it wasn't enough. When she got Bill going, we all did it together, it made a huge difference. So it's a lot of teamwork in terms of steering the boat downwind and light air. The best thing, again, as Zeke said before, the rudder needs to follow the boat, especially downwind, has to follow the boat. I forget why I put this photo in my mouth.
Because it looks nice.
Oh, I remember. This is one that
Oh, that's Jim.
it's Jim. Yeah. This is from Davis Island. I think the reason I put this in here is Traveler was all the way up, right? Boom is actually above center line, but he's still got some lee helm here. So there's clearly something's triggering this boat not to be super happy. Or maybe there was just a lift that he's pushing as a spot in time. But it's like, you know, they're lee helm, right? Crew's not really hiking, but the boom's high, so it could be a little draggy, like something in the set of your pie isn't just perfect. They need to find a way to free it up a little bit here. And if you look, the jib's in pretty far in the marks, it's pretty flat and tight. So maybe it could just be ease the backstay, power the jib up, ease the sheet out, something just to balance the boat up. You can tell it's a little out of whack. He's trying to get helm by over trimming the main. If you look, like the other thing, now I remember my notes, the outhaul's super tight. It's actually folded over there. You might just need an alcohol dump to power the main up. Like easy alcohol, ease the main sheet a touch, and the boat might just come to life. Something.
Yeah, that would be the first thing I would do is just ease that out a little bit. And again, yeah, could be he's just turning up into a lift or something
Could be,
like
but
that. I agree that the jib is definitely flat and sheeted hard. It's inside the marks.
and main alcohol's tight.
The main alcohol's tight. But this is one of those conditions where flat sails sheeted hard is gonna be quick. Once you're up to speed, remember, don't come off the starting line and rip your sails in. You need to accelerate once you're near your speed targets. That's when it's fast in this condition to be flat sails sheeted hard. 'Cause it's flat water, everybody's hiking for the most part. But you can see, I mean, they are hiking, but kind of barely. If they ease the alcohol a little bit, I bet you they could hike harder and they're gonna be going even faster.
So this is the only reason I show this on here. This is Kate's boat again with Jackson, but just seeing the differences. They didn't change their main sheet. Nothing happened here, but I remember the sequence. Jackson, you know, they kind of came into a lull. He was trying to heel the boat over. They tried to do it through main sheet. You could see how a little bit of main sheet, the boat went from looking normal to stalled, right?
Yeah.
And still, even with the main sheet on hard, pushing, keep the bow up. And it might have just needed to be crew off the rail, or, you know, just putting the bow down or something. But if you look, sails there really flat, really tight. And the boat on the right, you can tell, it just looks,
It's also, the water's flat. You can see
yeah,
the
it's flat water, but it looks like the boat's just struggling. Whereas the one on the left, maybe it's a little windier, but this is in a sequence, so it can't be that much. Just looks like a totally different boat, right? It's
Yeah,
just,
the bow wake's different.
yeah, I
too.
mean, just a little bit of sheet change makes all the difference there, right? So,
Something we look at from these photos from behind is balanced trim, which doesn't necessarily mean correct, but balanced trim would be when, see how the leech of the main right here is right on the mast at the spreaders, it's right there. If the boat was balanced trim, the clue and tack of the jib would be lined up. So in this photo, you would say that the main is trimmed harder than the jib is relative to each other for a perfect balanced trim. Not necessarily wrong, but that's just, and you can see they're on their outer mark there, or just outside the outer mark on the jib. So I might suggest if I was behind them to try a little, either a tighter jib or looser main to see if the boat's just a little more free and easy to sail. Knowing that it's Tampa and very, very flat water, the suggestion would probably be to try to sheet the jib a little bit harder. Try to get the jib leech on the inside mark, perhaps, or the middle mark, just because they're powered up and going.
yeah, I
And
mean,
harder would be more involved.
could be, yeah.
Could be,
Yeah, or it could just be
Depends.
lured sheet. Depends. No, but my guess is it's probably more in haul.
yeah, I would say that too, because the leech here is pretty straight.
Because the leech is pretty straight, it would
You
probably
don't see a lot of twists, like the bottom of the jib, it is rotated in more compared to up here, but not by very much. Like those very early photos we saw, the bottom of the jib was way in.
Yeah, I'd say because the leech is straight, and you can see that from on the boat just by looking up the back. If the leech is pretty straight, it's more in haul. If it looks like it's got a fair amount of twist, then it's lured sheet. Yeah. But to me, the other thing, and again, you can't see this on the boat, but you know, like from the coachway, you can see it. I mean, just how you can see the USA, totally different, right? The one on the right, if you're seeing that from behind, it's probably not going to be great.
So again, like this one on the left is not perfectly balanced, but it's pretty darn close. The one on the right, I feel like that's fine.
Right, exactly.
Unless, you know,
I mean, it's just an extreme example, you're right, from on the boat, it's hard necessarily to see the difference, but I guarantee you, the telltales on the leech on the boat on the right are probably stalled.
Now, on the main, I'm usually the telltales are always
Flowing or
stalled.
generally, usually the top one is
Top
especially
ones.
on the
Yeah,
gaff
top.
never flows, I don't think.
the second one down, I think, flows.
The second one should flow, but the top one should just.
Yeah.
The very top on the gaff back.
Not all the time. If it's flowing all the time, you're reaching, but it should be
It should be,
happy, half the time, whatever.
should be
roughly
moving
half
at
the time.
least.
And it's okay to
What, the
stall
one,
it
the second
all
one?
the time.
Yeah, I mean, you should get at least an occasional,
Yeah.
yeah. If you're not getting any, you're in a little bit of trouble.
Okay.
But anyway, this was, to me, was just a
A
in
great
sequence
example.
line of the difference there.
I also, like this picture on the right, again, these are millisecond snapshots. This is a look if you're trying to, what I call, capture the boat from getting too flat. Like maybe they're sailing into a short-term lull and they see breeze coming on the other side. It's better to do this for 3-5 seconds than it is to get somebody to slither in off the rail and then slither back out and do
Right.
all that.
Right.
This is a fine, like, just the boat's coming too flat, need to capture it, I'll pull the main sheet on a little bit, or ease the backstay, and it'll over trim the main temporarily,
Right.
especially in flat water. That's not a big deal. And if it keeps the boat on a steady angle of heel till the next pressure comes back, totally fine.
Yeah.
It's jib being in hauled to the cabin house.
Yeah. They were dragging their spin sheets, which was quite bad.
Bring it inside.
Alright, they are rigged inside.
That's 2 speed points.
Oh, no, they're outside. Actually, no, that's definitely part of it.
Bring it
Absolutely
inside
should
the
bring your
back
spin
part.
sheets inside.
Yeah,
The
should
white
go
lines.
inside.
Never
the
go
left.
outside.
Never.
No. Inside all the time.
I agree.
Ours are inside, we rig ours.
It's gonna rub on the lifelines, so it doesn't drag in the water like that, and when you have to go on the wing, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's when you come from the inside. It's
Pretty
not
nice
around
jib
the outside
fit
of the
though.
inside.
It is, that's a lot of in-haul, right?
A lot of in-haul.
Around the shrouds,
But to me,
inside
it's
the
Yeah,
lifelines.
we go around
how
the
it's
shrouds
just
inside
going over
the
catastrophe,
expansions.
right? Like, that's how you know you're
Yes, we
rigged.
do.
We changed to that. for the last
I don't
year.
have, I never.
You don't rig it.
Yes, I rig.
Tillers in the middle, travelers out, and
That's the way I like to do it.
Yeah.
everything looks like it's
Oh,
in
you're
kind
right,
of good
yeah.
balance there.
When- Yeah, after Sean said it this time, so.
I think it's the Brutus again, and then that's the same photo we saw.
Did they not have butches on that?
The only thing I liked about this photo
You
was
can't- you're not allowed to
crew
put
weight
them on.
forward. The boat
Put them
isn't
upside
heeled
down,
and
come
leeward,
out
but it's
of
not
the-
heeled
You're not
and leeward, it's
allowed
kind
to
of
do that.
balanced, it looks like it's going straight, no
You
no
can
stern
in
weight
point
coming
four, but
off.
not
I think this is the key for all the trimmers. I think you have to make sure you have like that amount of curl almost 75% of the time. It's really easy to over trim the kite on this boat, and as soon as you do that, the thing just dies. So
So
constantly,
what is that amount of curl?
maybe
in inches
approaching
or?
the first panel.
Yeah, it's like the first panel.
Yeah, just approaching the edge of the first panel. Should
Okay.
always kind of be just folding a little bit. And the main reason is just to get away from the leach of the main and just lets the boat accelerate. If the leach gets too firm, puck hits, the boat just doesn't go. It's gotta be, like we were saying before, full and twisty tight. Same thing, you want to be able to boat accelerate and go down.
It was too tough.
I think, the other thing I want to find here is, I think the jib on this boat is furled the wrong way. I know it seems like a little detail, it seems a bit ridiculous, but I firmly believe because the way we bear off at the windward mark, and for starting, you want to make sure that the jib is on the port side of the furler.
Yeah, it comes out to the port
It
side.
should come out
to flip
before.
around.
If your furler comes out to starboard, that way when you're starting, it's
think ours
wrapping
goes
over the
down. Ours
stay,
goes
and when you get to
Does
the
it?
Yeah.
windward mark and you're furling, you're pulling it around, it's doing like a 180 turn, I think
Yes.
that's.
So what do you have to do to change that?
Rewind it the other way.
Rewind the
So
drum.
busy.
Yeah.
Actually, we did it on Pete Fiery's boat in Miami this weekend, because it went up the wrong way, we just detached the tack, spun it the
Spun
other
the
way,
other
and
way.
That's
reattached
it,
it.
don't even need to go underneath.
No, nothing to do. But just make sure it spins, so that way, because when you're on the starting line, you unfurl, it just comes off on the leeward side, whereas the other way, you're pulling it around to windward, it's filling. And the same thing, when you go to furl at the windward mark, the jib's ease, it kind of just lazily goes around, whereas if you're pulling it the other way, you're forcing it around the windward
You
side.
get a much better roll.
Much better roll.
I agree.
So just unfurl it, we got it, I mean,
Is that-
not, nothing.
Yeah. Detach the jib from the tack,
And
and
the
then just,
whole lines up all right, go in, the feeder line and all?
Should,
some people will like just unfurl it and then detach the jib sheets and literally wrap the jib around the other way, which kind of is not good for your sail. Just unpin the tack from the furler.
That's just work.
I mean, the other thing I will say, kind of, you know, from how much you like your crew and your jibs. I mean, once a year, I think minimum, you unscrew the furler from the bow. It seems like a daunting task, but it's not that big of a deal once you do it. There's 4 screws, you take them out, you drop your furler down, cleaning the furler drum out, getting all the salt out of there, and just cleaning the balls. And if you're really ambitious, you spend $25 in West Marine and buy a new bag of balls and put them in there. It goes from the furler being a royal pain in the ass to a 2-finger pull every time. I'm sure we'll be a lot
We have to do
happier.
that.
So we
Except mine is epoxied in.
Shouldn't be.
It is.
Well, they might have been from the factory, but I think once you do it once, you just pop it out, you gotta go in there with a screwdriver, probably pry it out. Once you get it out once, it's easy. But I know it sounds, but I'm telling you, it's worth it.
I know.
It makes the boat.
I was gonna ask you, I gotta call the
The
factory.
furling infinitely easier when the furling
Because I
starts,
asked
when you
them.
have bad furls and you destroy your jib. Not that we don't want you to destroy your jib if I do. But,
You said this would be a lot of be very fast, but you guys ate up all the time.
Yeah, what happened?
Interaction.
Did it wrong.
It's good.
Too many questions.
It
All right,
depends.
no more questions. Questions?
We've been asking questions.
Yeah,
I don't know.
rake,
Yeah.
do you, like if you know it's gonna blow,
Yeah.
or will you change your rake? You figure out where you want it and you just keep it there? Okay?
Yeah.
There used to be a
So
whole,
it's lighter, heavier.
they've changed that, that's changed, that people were playing around with
I mean,
their.
we're generally at the 56,
Yeah.
I always get this number, 56 inches? 56, and then
Right.
there's a little range that boats go through just because the boats are a little different. But, I mean, we're talking
We should
quarter
check
inch
ours
maybe.
again too, because I
They're,
thought ours
yeah,
was
they're
57
definitely,
and a
I mean, you're
quarter.
not making that up. There's, like, since the beginning of the class, we've been getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer, and it seems like we found the too long, by way of going to sail in California, that everyone was like, it's light,
Right.
it's gonna be wavy, you want as much rake as you can get.
Yeah.
Some people sailed at pretty extreme rakes, and we're not faster. There is still definitely a range, but I think the biggest impact of that is your jib fit. And this 56 number, 56 and a quarter, 56 and a half, if you did a Coke Pepsi challenge, you wouldn't know the difference. We actually recently did that, and John,
Well-
we didn't tell him, we changed it. I was like, how's it feel? Shitty like a J70. That was the
Well, and the one thing I remember, and you'll hear this, because the Doyle guys talk about, they sail at longer rate. Oh, we sail at 58, right? And they measure to the different part of the furler. It's the
Yeah.
exact same measurement. So on our tuning guide, we measured the top pin of that round thing. Well, the Doyle measurement is to the very bottom pin, which is exactly 2 inches apart. So when they're like, oh, we sailed more rake, we're at 58 inches, it's the same length. Because there was a widespread panic for a while that all the Doyle boats had a longer head stay, and then we finally all realized that they were measuring to a different point. It got very easy, very quick to realize they're all the same. So,
So I've got a question
Yeah.
having to do with the different masts.
yep,
And particularly, you're saying that the European mast has more bend sideways.
yep.
What's good, what's bad in terms of wanting to bend it sideways or not? I always thought you don't want sideways bend.
If in light air, if the middle of the mast can sag to leeward, it's allowing your head stay to get softer, power up the jib more, and it powers up the main more.
You're allowed to, you can generate power quicker.
When your mast is
Sagging to leeward.
sagging in the middle to leeward.
yeah, spreaders to
You're,
leeward.
you're getting more power and forward.
Correct.
So
Exactly.
So that's a loose guide on the luge for the end of the shroud.
Well, it's like at the same
At the
tension,
same tension, it's
you
gonna
would
sag.
sign up the Selden rig, and it would be sagging to leeward. In the southern, it'll sag more forward, bend more. So it'll actually be flatter in the bottom of the southern because the mast is pulling the sail forward. And on the Selden, it's going to leeward and making a fuller sail.
with the same number of gauge.
Yeah. So it's a different thing for sure. It's a different weapon. So does anyone have a Selden rig in here?
I'm good.
No, I mean, they're both really, they're fast, they just behave a little bit differently, you might have to tune them a little bit differently. On the Selden, I think you can actually sight up the track like you would on an Annapolis or a J22 and tune your lowers, whereas with the Southern, you kind of guess a little bit, read your tuning guide.
So jib halyard tension, that's rigged to the port side of the mast. You talk about the fact that you adjust that regularly. How are you getting to it from the starboard side?
Tack it over the vang. The forward person has the tail and they throw it in between the vang and the mast.
Okay.
Like ours is attached to our Cunningham, which is on the starboard side of the mast, so like they're sewn together at the end, and the forward guy just throws the whole thing through, so we can always adjust everything.
Gotcha.
I love that move. I know people who hate that move because they have accidentally brought
Yeah.
the spinnaker down through that loop.
Yeah,
That's
that'd be
a
careful.
day ender. So have a really good
That's when you
manager
just rip it
on
apart.
You
that
have to have,
rope.
you have to have a good manager of the boat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or tie them. I've just tied them because
Yeah, tying
it's
it.
a little
What are we
less
tying
committed,
together?
I'm afraid. Tie them. But it is important.
Yeah,
And,
so
but
that you can
even
just
if they're not
move
tied,
on.
Just tack it.
just tack it.
Tack it.
I would also say
I
don't
like
put a
the
knot
tacking.
on the end of your Cunningham or your jib halyard fine tune. We've had that, the knot will like wrap around the spinnaker sheet at the clue and catch itself. Another day under, So no knot, it's rigged externally, you don't need a knot, keep the knot off.
Okay.
Or tie it to the other.
But I think the one thing about the jib halyard too, it should be long enough that when you're sitting on the rail, you can,
Which we have.
yeah, absolutely. I think one mistake is that we're cuts it short, and you can't get the,
Yeah.
When you add this purchase, it's like,
Yeah.
you can actually pull it on and ease it without
I
like.
think we even have
unpacking it.
blocks to do it.
I
Shouldn't have to
think
buy
we
any
do.
blocks.
So, when you talk about the main, you said that the gross adjustment is the traveler, and then the fine adjustment is the main sheet. On the jib,
Okay.
Ready to visit.
what would be the gross to the fine?
I'll have to check with him.
Love that question.
I think the gross would be the leeward sheet and the fine would be the
My
info.
lawnmower broke
And then
yesterday.
the
It's
middle would
currently
be the
stuck in the middle of the yard.
halyard.
Nice.
So,
The halyard is probably the grossest.
Yeah, the halyard's the grossest.
Grossest.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
And then,
Wait,
and
so-
then the leeward sheet.
And then the.
So you saying inward, leeward, halyard in terms of grip, in terms of trim,
And then probably the car.
and then cars, yeah, even grosser.
The car's the grossest.
See, the car, the thing about the car in this boat, and, you know, we've talked about leads and how critical it is. Because the in-hauler pulls forward, you have a lot of leeway there, so it's pretty hard to get really caught. If you need to move the lead forward, you can ease the leeward sheet, pull the in-hauler, and it'll pull the jib forward
Right there.
a little bit. I mean,
The halyard probably moves more than the leeward sheet though.
I would agree with that, yeah.
I think the windward sheet moves the most,
Then the
then
halyard.
the halyard, then the leeward
I would
sheet,
agree
then
with
the
that.
car.
So it's all confusing.
Jib car,
Yeah, I screwed that
Car,
up.
leeward sheet,
halyard.
halyard, in-hauler. I think that's a fair, I agree
So
with that.
you think you're adjusting the inward a lot for puffs?
I
The
almost
problem
would
is
make an
it's
argument-
hard, I mean, is it like a banjo?
I
or-
almost would make, I think it's a little bit of this is technique and how you do it. Some boats, I think, would actually say the halyard is the finest adjustment, and the in-hauler, would be- it's like, they're,
Yeah, those two move a
they're-
lot.
those two
But
move
adjusting, I mean, adjusting the in-hauler under load is,
pain in the ass.
Banjo.
yeah, it's just, but
It's hard, it's clunky.
Yeah, it doesn't,
I think the halyard is, I think if I had to make a change quick, the halyard would be the first go-to.
right,
It's easy.
right. Yeah.
it opens the sail up or does something.
Do you remember like how I talked about capturing the heel when you overturn the main? Same's true with the in-hauler, like if, oh shit, we see a big wave, big chop, or there's a bit of a light spot, they'll just reach behind and just pull it up and just grab some power in the bottom of the jib by banjoing the in-haul, and as soon as it's gone, release it off. Maybe it's the same with the halyard, they might be moving together, but
That's a
it
lot.
moves, the in-haul moves for sure.
So you think so you could banjo the in-hauler
Sure.
for
Yeah,
quick changes and then more permanent changes use the
in 8 to 15 knots on our team, he's banjoing the in-hauler frequently. He puts it in the cleat where it would be the most eased, in the big puff or rover stood or whatever. And it's, the normal is it's banjo.
Oh, so he's doing curls every day.
It doesn't look like it.
We don't do it that way.
What do you do?
We just adjust it as needed. I don't
Adjust,
think,
are you adjusting the in-hauler
yeah, I'll adjust it.
and you're saying it's like this?
Yeah, but
Well,
I'll
the
adjust
problem
it.
is the load is so, I mean,
It's hard.
The main trimmer can get it, like if we have to make a change in the cleat, he'll hold it in the banjo and be like,
Yeah.
can you cleat this? I'm like, sure.
I think the banjo thing is, to hold it for a whole upper leg is fully unrealistic and it moves. And then a puff hits and your arm's moving, I kind of don't.
you don't like that.
No, I don't, but other people do, so. Maybe I'm just lazy.
Efficient.
You didn't talk any about tack line on the spinnaker, like when you have it eats back a little bit, when you have it pulled down tight. Is there kind of a rule of thumb on that?
On our team, we only ease the tack line if we're like desperate for a very low mode. Otherwise, it's down.
Same.
So it's tactical, I'd say.
It has to
And
be
it's
enough
very
breeze
rare.
for the tack, when you ease it, it doesn't fall into
Right.
the.
Yeah.
I would say,
Tack has to be
I think in the last 3 years, I've eased the tack line off 4 times. Like you have to be desperate to need it, and if you do it, it's not gonna be a great one. I think it's just down all the time.
Yeah,
'Cause
usually
usually
if
if
you're
you need to
soaking into the leeward mark, or you really need a lane, or whatever it is, or then we
Usually-
float it temporarily, and the minute, like, the kite will curl a little bit, and he'll trim, and if it curls, like, looking unstable, we just bump the tack line on him real quick.
And usually if you need to get that deep, you go to the wing
Go to
anyway.
wing.
And generally, if you're going to the wing, you find it much easier to just bring the chute around rather than flipping the main.
I think you need both, for sure, we,
But if you have, you didn't care one way or another, usually,
Yeah.
flipping the batten and the main gets stuff shaking, rocking the boat.
yeah, I think it's generally easier to go kite over wing,